Welcome to the Campus Energy and Sustainability Podcast. In each episode, we talk with leading campus professionals, thought leaders, engineers, and innovators addressing the unique challenges and opportunities facing higher ed and corporate campuses. Our discussions will range from energy conservation and efficiency to planning and finance, from building science to social science, from energy systems to food systems. We hope you're ready to learn, share, and ultimately accelerate your institution towards solutions. I'm your host, Dave Carlscott. I'm a director of energy and sustainability at Brailsford and Dunleavy.
I see our role as Andy and his team and others are setting the vision, they're setting the goals, they're setting the standards, and then we as an athletic department are contributing towards those higher level campus goals and standards, and they're providing us some tools and guidance to get there.
I'm sure if you ask athletics, Michigan medicine, or student life what their number one mission critical priorities are, sustainability might not be at the very top. And so it's our job to work closely with those units to come up with a plan and a program that's successful for all of us.
We're trying to manage what we can and get that story out there and show folks that, hey, we do care about the environment. On 110,000 people here on Saturday, and we're really only sending, less than 2 tons of waste to a landfill. Everything else is getting composted or recycled.
In this episode, we tackle sustainability through the lens of collegiate athletics at the University of Michigan. My guests are Andy Berki, Director of the Office of Campus Sustainability, and Paul Dunlop, Associate Director of Facilities Operations for Michigan Athletics. We discuss both the logistics and the community impacts of Michigan's impressive zero-waste game days. You'll hear about campus energy efficiency efforts improving the fan experience, and you'll hear us explore the special role of athletics in U.S. higher education, including its cultural power and very real sustainability challenges. Whether you're focused on campus operations, athletics, or institutional strategy, this episode offers real-world insights for creating a culture of sustainability that sticks. I hope you enjoy this episode recorded in May 2025. Paul and Andy, it's great to have you on the show today.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
I think we'll start with just some basic introductions. Maybe, Paul, I'll start with you. Can you just give us a little bit about who you are and a little bit about how you got into this work at the nexus of sustainability and athletics?
Yeah, for sure. My name's Paul Dunlop. I'm the Associate Athletic Director for Facility Operations and Capital Projects. And within that, I'm the lead for sustainability on the athletic department. So we have 27 buildings, a little over 2 million square feet of space in athletics. And my team manages the day-to-day usage, the setups, the preparations for events, hosting those events, cleaning up from those events. And then from a sustainability perspective, I'm tied in with our preventative maintenance programs, our corrective maintenance, energy conservation efforts, our waste diversion efforts. And then I also work on capital projects. So we're doing either smaller or larger renovations, working with design teams to make buildings, construct buildings that allow our teams to be successful and win on the field, and try to make those buildings sustainable. Right? I'm always thinking a little bit further down the line. We design buildings are on a table, but I'm the guy 6 months or a year later that's operating that building, and is it operating the way it was designed to operate?
Great. Andy.
I'm Andy Berki. I'm the Executive Director for the Office of Campus Sustainability at the University. I'm aligned centrally within our Business and Finance office, reporting up through our Chief Financial Officer. I've been working in the sustainability space on campus for over 30 years, and my office is primarily responsible for developing programs to drive progress on institutional-wide sustainability and carbon neutrality goals. And I have a large engineering team focused on reducing energy consumption in existing buildings. We also manage all of the recycling, operations on campus, composting, operations on campus, and we have about 20 full-time staff within my department.
Yeah, I know the University of Michigan to be one of the highly reference programs within my work in sustainability around higher ed, but it's great to talk to you guys both today and really narrowing in on this topic around sustainability in athletics and stadiums in particular. I'll admit it's not a topic I personally have spent a lot of time in. Most of my work's been more on district energy or energy efficiency in buildings and things. So there's some overlaps, it sounds like, Paul, with what you're doing. But I've always been impressed with the at least high level goals and metrics that I've heard coming out of the University of Michigan. I know you have a pretty substantial waste diversion goal. I know you made some pretty good progress, and the fact that you even have composting on campus is impressive to a lot of campuses. Maybe, Andy, I'll start with you. Maybe talk a little bit about the operational strategies that you've found to be most useful, like what's worked so far with what you've been doing, and maybe you can correct any of my metrics if I didn't get those right.
Yeah, so we have an institutional waste reduction goal to reduce waste being sent to landfills by 40% from our baseline. And that includes all facilities on our 40 million square feet of infrastructure on the Ann Arbor campus. So that covers everything. And I think some of the programs that we found to be most effective, including a very robust composting program. So in addition to what we have going on at the stadium and athletics as far as zero waste, we have a robust program that covers all of our buildings on campus where we compost food waste and other compostables coming out of our buildings. We also have a very effective recycling program on campus. And actually, just this week, as one example, we capture everything coming out of our residence halls when our students are leaving campus. Roughly 10 to 12 tons of material is captured a year and diverted from landfill and recycled and back to the community, actually. So those are all programs that are really effective for us.
That's great. As a parent of who just drove his kids' stuff home from college last weekend, I can relate to that one. So, Paul, I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about game day. That sounds like, I know I've been to plenty of sporting events, and people don't tend to clean up after themselves very well in that state of mind. Either they're celebrating or maybe not celebrating, but talk a little bit about that process. That seems overwhelming.
Sure. Well, there's no bins in the seating bowl for you to throw your waste away. We have 107,000 seats, so we don't have enough room left over to put bins out there in the seating bowl. So yeah, I would say half of the waste that's collected from a football game day is what's picked up on a Sunday morning after the game, but the other half is what people dispose of, our fans dispose of themselves. The Michigan Stadium Zero Waste Program started in 2017. Partnership with Andy and his team. Took a lot of time and effort to really come up with how we were going to do this. It had been put forward by students for a couple of years before that, and we love the fact that our students are passionate about sustainability, and they nudged us for a couple of years to say we really ought to do this, and other big stadiums were doing it. So we got on board 2017, and we've been doing it pretty successfully since then. It's been a journey. I think we started off and got some things right and got some things wrong, and we've learned over the years how to do it best. We're not the only big stadium doing it, right? So I've interacted with other stadium operators and folks in the industry to learn best practices. But I think we're doing a decent job. We don't generate as much waste as one might think if you consider the size of the Ann Arbor campus. And even though we have 110,000 people there on a football Saturday, the amount of waste that's being generated is a very small percentage of the overall campus waste, but it's super, super visible. It's really important, right? It's probably the best way for us to demonstrate as an institution that we're committed to waste diversion, because it takes a lot of effort. It costs more, but it's important, and that's why we do it.
Well, two follow-ups there, I guess. One would be, it'd be interesting just to hear logistically how you do it, but maybe kind of keying off your last question. So it is relatively small in the grand scheme of the entire university, but have you seen some spillover effects from using that visible time in the rest of campus?
I'll let Andy answer that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It's hard to quantify, right, what the impact of the program at the stadium is on the rest of campus, but just to punctuate what Paul said, I mean, we really value that program more from a cultural impact standpoint and the message it sends. And, when you have 110,000 people in the stadium, a significant percentage of those people are coming from the community, right? They're not University of Michigan staff, faculty, or students. They're also community members. And what we, in addition to the actual operational piece of the Stadium Zero Waste program, athletics does a fantastic job of publicizing what we're doing and why we're doing it on the big screens at the stadium during intermissions and at halftime. And it's that kind of impact that we can make on the community and what they take away from that and hopefully carry forth at their own homes is where we feel the greatest impact is.
No, that's great. I often will say, there's certain programs at universities which are to get the gold star for the university or the college itself, like we're doing the right thing as an institution, but there are some other things, to solve global problems we need to like ramp up and send out. And that sounds like a great way to really affect your entire region as opposed to just the staff. That's great. But Paul, maybe can you talk us through, I'm just really curious, like how do you actually pull that off? That sounds like that's a lot of stuff. Like what happens to it? Can you just give us the blow by blow?
Sure. Well, in theory, we control the waste stream, which makes it easier. So it's a closed loop waste stream that anything that's put out there on a football game day. So thinking about within the fence perimeter on a football game day, the waste being generated is either from food and beverage sales, merchandise sales, or it's back of house. So some people sneak things in. We know that happens, but that's a pretty small percentage of the overall waste. And
It's probably those Michigan State fans, right? Yeah.
probably we won't get into that. But the key right from the get-go for us was alignment with the vendors and concessionaires. So if we're selling hot dogs, sodas, hamburgers, the packaging that all of those food items come in needs to be accepted at your local recycling or compost facilities. And we found that manufacturers will advertise products as recyclable, but our local MRF didn't necessarily accept them. So there was a couple of years of working through the packaging materials to ensure everything was compliant and that the quality of product was acceptable. The hot dogs was something at the start. It was really a problem. Finding a product that would keep the hot dogs moist and warm was difficult. It took a couple of years to find something that finally got worked out. And so once you control the waste stream, we only put out 2 bins. We have a compost bin and a recycling bin. We do not have a fan-facing landfill bin. We only have landfill collection in the back of house areas and behind the concession stands. So we found one of the common sources of contamination was our nonprofit organizations who come in and operate the concession stands for us on a game day. There's over 1,000 people doing that, and gloves, food service wipes, et cetera, were ending up in one of the 2 fan-facing bins. So one of the changes we made was putting a landfill bin behind the counter to try to keep that common contamination out. We also jokingly refer to the dumpster police, where we found that the effort was being made on the front end for folks to separate and bag the waste. And then they would get brought over to the waste collection areas. There's 4 big areas around the concourse. And whether it was our janitorial services, the NPO groups, facility staff, they might throw a blue bag full of recycling materials into the landfill bin. Just and for whatever reason, perhaps the recycling bin was too full. So we now have dedicated folks who monitor, they police the dumpsters to make sure that the bags are thrown in the correct dumpsters. Low-hanging fruit, but proved to be really successful.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing to think about all of those steps. And one of the things that I always struggle with on doing this work, people are like, oh, you work in sustainability. Oh, solar panels and recycling. Those are the only 2 things that you have to think about, right? And you just described, everything from the actual operations of the game day, the actual, how you buy the products. I mean, there's so many steps there. And a lot of those aren't necessarily the decisions of an individual fan. It sounds like you've made the decisions for the individual fan just really, really simple, which is great.
We've certainly tried to, and one thing that I think has aided in that process is taking the University of Michigan's signage. So if you walk into any building on the University of Michigan campus, you're going to see a standardized sign above the recycle bin, the compost bin, or the landfill bin. We took that template and then customized it for the stadium waste stream. So the materials that you might find in the library are different than what you're going to find in Michigan Stadium, but we kept that same template, that same look and design with icons, again, trying to make it super simple for the fans. When they just glance at it, they know which bin they're supposed to dispose of that material in.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and Andy, you mentioned some of the commercials in the middle of or on the big screen. How did that come to be? Because that seems like a lot of work as well. I know doing anything on a big screen at a stadium takes some planning.
I mean, that's really to athletics' benefit. To be honest with you, they were the ones that were the impetus behind making sure that happened from a messaging standpoint. So I'd, give them all the credit and emphasizing the importance of that program and taking up some premium sort of screen time, I guess I would say, to publicize what we're doing from a sustainability standpoint.
Oh, that's great. Well, one more topic on the waste stream and recycling composting. Like, do you have metrics that you've been tracking, and how have those maybe changed over time? I imagine that's probably gotten more sophisticated as you've gotten more sophisticated.
Yeah, we do. We quantify everything that we have leaving campus and we measure it in tons. So it's tons of material that we capture. We measure that on an annual basis, report it out. We have very good platforms on our websites. So for those ever interested in seeing how we do it, we can get a hold of our University of Michigan Office of Campus Sustainability or go to the Planet Blue website, just pull up our waste metrics. They are quantified and reported out. We track that really closely.
Right. And I guess one other related question would be, it sounds like this morphed over the course of maybe a decade or so. Is that fair? And if so, it sounds like there were a lot of individual decisions that had to get sort of institutionalized, and typically that means funding decisions associated with those. Can you speak a little bit about that journey? Like, how did you get from where you were to where you are and get people to agree to not only do it, but the people that had to pay for it to pay for it?
Yeah, it's really been a journey over the course of time as I've seen the sustainability program grow. Paul mentioned earlier about students sort of nudging athletics, and I would say students have been really important stakeholders in this journey and have nudged central administration along the way to establish both institutional goals and really formalize our program. And with that has come centralized funding that has enabled us to implement many of these programs across campus, including composting. So I have a good annual budget that's dedicated specifically toward our composting program. And as our campus continues to grow over time in infrastructure and need, I just evaluate the budget, evaluate the need, and it's been supported from our highest levels of administration, which is very important and related to our success.
So is that to say then that because the students demanded it, it happened, not because there was some payback or some sort of like cost savings associated with it?
Yeah, the waste program specifically is no financial benefit to the University of Michigan. It's really been an environmental program, and it's not only students. I mean, we that work in this field across campus, staff and faculty included, also want to do what we can to protect the environment. But students have been very helpful in moving this forward, maybe faster than it would have.
Interesting. Well, maybe that's a good transition. Then I know, Paul, you also mentioned you run the buildings and the infrastructure, the energy. It sounds like, I imagine that's a little less forward facing. I mean, obviously things should work and lights should work, obviously for the games, especially a night game. Can you speak a little bit more about that aspect of the program?
Yeah, absolutely. Most of the times, folks don't realize that there's anything happening in a building until it doesn't work. Right? They
Right.
don't they don't realize the amount of time and effort that goes into preventative maintenance in operations. But from the athletics perspective, we really do try to minimize energy consumption, not only because it's contributing to the campus goals of carbon neutrality, but it makes good business sense. We're self-funded here at the University of Michigan Athletics, so we're looking for any way possible to reduce our utility costs. Do that in a number of ways. HVAC scheduling is very important. We don't just schedule buildings to turn on at 6 in the morning and turn off at 10 o'clock at night. Every single building has a customized HVAC schedule based on its user needs. And sometimes we push back. Coaches might want to have a late night practice that would require adjusting the HVAC schedule. And we tend to have conversations about, well, if we do that, it's going to activate the building longer. And do we really need to? So it's become a priority just on day-to-day operations. Another huge thing for us has been a partnership with Andy's team on building recommissioning. They have provided us with a service where engineers come in and really dig into all of our major building systems to identify inefficiencies. And not only are they finding inefficiencies, but they're finding some gaps in our preventative maintenance programs. And one recent example, we found an outdoor air damper that was commanded open 3 years ago in one of our smaller arenas. So we've been heating that building through 3 Michigan winters with 100% outdoor air. It's not ideal, but sometimes these things happen where technicians make adjustments in the field and they get forgotten about. And not all of our buildings have great controls. So this recommissioning program has just been extremely valuable. And we're super appreciative of Andy and his team. And I think it's a great example of how the campus and the athletic department can work together towards common goals.
Yeah, how are you guys structured? So does athletics pay its own utility bills? Is there bifurcation there, or is it kind of all centrally funded?
Yeah, we're paying for all of our utilities and for all of our maintenance and operational needs.
Great. So that's got a direct, like fixing the open damper for 3 years was a financial boon, I suppose, to the athletics team, right?
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything to add there, Andy?
It's just a great partnership. I mean, we have within my office, we have 13 full-time engineers that focus on reducing energy consumption in existing buildings, and that's not only to save money, but it's to contribute to our carbon emission reduction goals, eliminating all Scope 1 emissions by 2040 and all Scope 2 emissions by the end of this year. And the program Paul's speaking of, recommissioning, is one of those programs that's super successful. We like calling it our building tune-up program for folks so they can understand. It's kind of like, you have a car and you bring it into the dealership or wherever for a tune-up after it has 100,000 miles. You find all this stuff, right, that's kind of gone wrong over time. Our buildings are no different, right? They've been built. They've gone through renovations and changes over the years, and maintenance folks have been in there and technicians have been in there, but when you stick a couple of engineers in there to kind of do a top to bottom evaluation of how the building is performing, then you find a lot of opportunities that can reduce energy consumption, save money at the same time, and reduce carbon emissions. So it's a real positive program that we have.
Yeah, more specifically, I think, Paul, you gave the example of the open damper, which is kind of finding a problem and fixing it. But have there been other big programs? I imagine over this, maybe your time, Andy, you've probably gone through some lighting upgrades, or sports venues have different profiles than your.
Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on this one, but one example is, we have a formal program called a revolving energy fund, an REF, where we invest $5 million a year in our existing buildings and find specific projects to fund. And then this energy savings associated with those projects that we implement in the buildings, whether it's pump replacements, HVAC work, lighting, envelope work, the energy savings associated with those projects is put back into the fund to fund more projects over time. So that's one example of our super successful program that we have on campus in addition to the recommissioning program.
That's great. That's campus-wide, not just with athletics, I assume?
Yeah, it's campus-wide.
No, that's great. Do you stick $5 million every year into it, and then you still get to keep the savings as well, or is that's great if that's how it's set up?
Yeah, that's how it's been working, and obviously, depending on the project that we're doing, you have different payback periods, right? And
Right.
so, some of the projects have payback periods that are really short, like 2 to 3 year paybacks on lighting projects, and some of them have longer paybacks, 7 or 8 years. So, depending on the size of the project and the length of the payback, dictates how much money is going back into the fund.
That's great. Paul, any specific projects you would want to highlight specifically for athletics or athletic facilities?
Yeah, our sports lighting systems have been not necessarily the fastest payback. So, Andy was referencing, ideally, some of these projects are paying for themselves in a 7 or 8 year period. We've retrofitted the sports lighting systems at Michigan Stadium and Chrysler Center, our two biggest venues, with LED. We went from 1,000-watt metal halide lamps down to 600-watt LED lamps, so 40% reduction. But the runtime on those is pretty short on a daily basis, so the payback is much, much longer. But not only are we seeing an energy reduction, we're improving the fan experience. Now we can flash the lights, change the color, and it gives our marketing teams just some options to improve the game day experience. So we love it when we can find projects that save money and improve either the game day atmosphere, user comfort, or help our teams do whatever they need to do to be successful. They're few and far between, but LED lighting seems to be a common one.
Well, maybe that's a good transition too. I think one place I wanted to take this is, you've alluded to a couple of programs that you're doing that aren't necessarily money savers, but are kind of the right thing to do, or being motivated by reinforcing culture in the campus, or being driven by students. Athletics is an interesting part of a university culture in that it's the part that most average people still think about. Long after they've gotten their degree, they still go to the football game of their alma mater or, follow the basketball tournament, et cetera. How is it different maybe? And maybe this might be, I'll throw this at you, Andy, since you kind of span both worlds, but maybe Paul, you've got some insights in here too. How is doing sustainability in athletics different than doing sustainability within the broader university context? Is there things that kind of pop to mind in there?
For athletics, I think our challenge is the funding model, right? So athletics is self-funded, and we're always trying to evaluate what sustainability efforts make the most sense, right? So we can't always fund or do everything that we want to do, particularly from a building design and construction perspective. We're working on that. We're definitely making progress, but I see our role as Andy and his team and others are setting the vision, they're setting the goals, they're setting the standards. And then we as an athletic department are contributing towards those higher level campus goals and standards. And they're providing us some tools and guidance to get there. But the funding still can be challenging, even for a big place like us.
Yeah. Is there anything where, improving fan experience, getting more people in the door, ticket sales, that kind of thing probably does drive revenue in ways that improving the experience in a poetry program won't, in terms of facilities. I'm a liberal arts major, so shout out to all us liberal arts majors out there. But Andy, any differences you see, or is it all just kind of part of the bigger, similar story, just different department?
Yeah, I mean, I think Paul articulated well some of the challenges associated with decentralized nature of the University of Michigan from a funding perspective. So we have what's considered the general fund, which is all the colleges and units. But then athletics, student life, which is all of our student residence halls and student functions, and our University of Michigan healthcare, Michigan medicine, clinical operations, they all act very independently from a budget model perspective. And I'm sure if you ask athletics, Michigan medicine, or student life what their number one mission critical priorities are, sustainability might not be at the very top, right? And so they have to balance, I would say, their priorities with the institutional sustainability goals and other priorities that we have from a funding perspective as well as from other perspectives. And so it's our job to work closely with those units to come up with a plan and a program that's successful for all of us so that we can continue making progress on the sustainability front and continue to meet their missions as well.
Maybe one thing I would add to that is a lot of what we do in athletics is in conflict philosophically with some sustainable practices. So, we host 110,000 people at Michigan Stadium 7 or 8 Saturdays per year. Think about how far folks are flying from various states, driving from various distances. They're all coming to this one place. They're various modes of transportation. Our teams also fly all over the country. The Big Ten conference footprint has expanded, and our teams need to go out to LA, to Oregon, to Washington to compete now. And so we realize that those are challenges. Those are challenges that facing the athletic department and facing all athletic departments across the country. So we're really trying to, as we recognize and understand that, and those things are difficult for us to change and control. So we are highly focused on the things that we can change and we can control, such as our waste diversion, our energy management practices, our water conservation practices. That's what we know we can make an impact there. So we're trying to do so.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And as a consultant who flies all over the country, I have similar, working on sustainability. I have kind of like even more of a dissonance in my work sometimes. I'd like to believe when I'm flying to do something good that I'm making a bigger impact than the harm I'm causing in the process. But I mean, how have you measured that, or how do you, even the parts you can't control, like air travel, like just tell me a little bit more about how you guys have been thinking about that, understanding the fact that you don't control what the airlines do, and that is kind of inherently necessary to have a team in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask me that question a year from now, I'll have a better answer for you, but we've done some things already. So air travel, as one example, are considered scope 3 carbon emissions, right? And the institution right now is in the process of establishing our Scope 3 emission goals. So we're sort of in the midst of that. But we recognize that this is something that's an impact from a sustainability and carbon standpoint. And so we're doing some things right now to enter into an agreement with Delta Airlines for sustainable airplane fuel, an SAF, airplane fuel program for the entire University of Michigan that will enable us during all business travel, which would include athletes as well, to reduce carbon emissions associated with airplane travel. So we're doing that immediately before our Scope 3 goals have been established. But this topic in general about the expansion of the conference, as Paul mentioned, is definitely a topic of conversation and the associated environmental impact with the expansion of the conference. So
Yeah, no, it definitely falls into that category of places that maybe the institution can influence but doesn't directly control. But I'll be anxious to hear how that goes and maybe check back in with you in a couple of years, because it's, I think, something we're seeing. People have pretty good line of sight to Scope 1 and 2. Not to say those are easy by any means, but at least there's known strategies for getting at them. We talked quite a bit about, waste. That's at least a well understood. It's got its own set of wicked problems associated with it, but I think there are at least ways that you can, like you've shown and some of the things you've talked about today. But air travel and general commuting and there's a lot there. So maybe shifting a little bit, you guys are a little more advanced. I mean, I travel to campuses all over the country. Some of them don't even know what composting is, let alone, have a robust composting program, for example, or, really have no energy efficiency to speak of, or don't have any goals. If you're going to talk to some of your colleagues around the country, and we'll maybe focus mostly on athletics here, but what advice would you get people at varying stages trying to get started? Where should they start? What lessons did you learn that you wish you would have done it a little differently, maybe?
I love the term R&D, rip off and duplicate, right? I think that there are a lot of people like us. You can go look on the mgoblue.com website and see what we're putting out there as our sustainability goals, initiatives. And I did the same thing. I went and looked at what my peers are doing at similar institutions across the conference and beyond. I also would recommend starting small. And I think many folks in athletics are probably already doing some things that check the box of sustainability, but you just need to take a step back and try to document, look at your waste programs, look at your energy conservation programs. Maybe you've already retrofitted LED bulbs throughout your buildings, but if you take some time to document those efforts, calculate the paybacks, and then communicate that, get that out there. I think that's still an area where we have a lot of room for improvement, that we're doing a lot of great things, I think, but we could do a better job of communicating and getting people excited. And again, understanding that there's some challenges with being sustainable in the collegiate athletics space, but trying to manage what we can and get that story out there and show folks that, hey, we do care about the environment. We're, and 110,000 people here on Saturday, and we're really only sending, less than 2 tons of waste to a landfill. Everything else is getting composted or recycled. I think that communication, that promotion component is really important and one we can do better.
That's great. One follow-up there, Paul. You mentioned there were some places you looked at when you were getting started. What were some of those other institutions you might call out?
I think our peers in the Big Ten are the obvious ones: Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan State. They all, and even now the California schools in Oregon and Washington have joined the conference. Many folks have good information out there on their websites, and I've talked to my peers at those institutions. One thing that I think has helped us here is to take a campus first approach. Some other athletic departments have tried to establish their own sustainability goals and priorities. We tried that a little bit to start, and I think we've pivoted and said, hey, let's have the campus lead what we want to be all about. And then as an athletic department, we'll help with the university and the campus overall get there.
Interesting. Yeah. Andy, same question to you, recommendations for people just getting started. And I'd be interested in Paul's comment about the campus-led process first, because that's kind of your purview.
Yeah. I would just emphasize what Paul said about sort of not trying to recreate the wheel. There are a lot of institutions out there that are far along in this journey in implementing sustainability throughout their athletics programs that they've learned along the way. So use those institutions as resources, reach out to them, take a road trip, take a field trip. I think the other part of that success is critical, however, is to have leadership support and have somebody within the organization, within athletics specifically, who wears a sustainability hat. Now, Paul does a lot of different things for athletics, but he's also been passionate about sustainability for a long time and has had a lot of responsibility in this space. And he's been critical to the success of implementing programs in our athletics program. So, for other universities that really want to begin on this journey, not have, as an example, the sustainability program run out of a student office, right? Because students are only on campus for 4 or 5 years and then they leave. So have some kind of leadership support. Make sure it has somebody there, a full-time staff member with background in operations would be very helpful, because a lot of this is operational context to it, and have that person be part of their job as a responsibility to create the program and then learn from others.
So you need the passion and the skill set, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely.
That makes a lot of sense. I guess one other leadership question I would have is, I would imagine leading, like with, presidents, board members, people at that stage, athletics probably is a gateway drug for them for sustainability as well, right? Like that's a lot of, like, they care about obviously the whole institution and have different priorities themselves. But one common thread, at least what I see with leadership, is they all care a lot about how the football team is doing or the women's basketball team is doing or whatever. I've been in meetings where they'll talk about, hey, our lacrosse team is in the championship this week, and that's like, we can't get any work done because they're so focused on it. Have you found athletics to be a good tool to speak to that audience, or am I just connecting dots that aren't there?
I think that athletics is uniquely positioned on campus. You're right. I think folks often refer to the big house as the front porch of the university, right? So it's super visible, accessible. People recognize and relate to it. It's been really important for our leadership in athletics to make sure we're doing everything that we can, and without support of Ward Manuel, our athletic director, a number of our sustainability efforts might not be funded or they might not be prioritized. So absolutely, it's important that the leadership has buy-in and there's support for folks to take on what might be considered extra work. So, Andy mentioned earlier, I'm not a sustainability person by training. I've been in facility management and operations here at the university for 15 years, and my role has evolved and expanded over time. And I've had to learn from others and lean on our campus experts to help me understand what we should be doing. But again, without that leadership support, funding, and being able to dedicate time and effort isn't going to happen.
Yeah, and I imagine, back to your point about communication, that's probably critical for maintaining and expanding that support.
For sure. And I think most folks in leadership really, you said earlier that they identify with the sports teams and alumni, get very excited when we win national championships like we did.
Yeah, so that coming from Seattle, I probably won't highlight that. Maybe we can cut that part out. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, man, I think it's nice when you can tie both things together, right? When the athletics teams are successful they're doing things as well as they can from a sustainability perspective, seems like an ideal scenario.
That's great. Yeah, just wrapping up, any other things we didn't get into that you wanted to share about your programs?
I mean, I think one thing worth mentioning specifically about the Stadium Zero Waste program, which I think is really great, is it's sort of a full circle program from a composting standpoint. And so all of the food waste, all of the compostable waste that's collected at the stadium actually goes out to the University of Michigan's campus farm, and they're going to be using all that collected from the stadium to turn it into active compost that they're going to use to grow vegetables on the farm. And the vegetables then many of them are served in our residence halls to our students. So it's a complete circular deal. Last year, was the first year we piloted the program, and I believe they captured waste from one game or maybe two of the home games just to see how well it went, I would say. And the campus farm loved it. I guess the compostable waste was clean. It made really good compost. And so this year they're like, hey, can we have the waste from all the games? And so that's just a really good story, I guess, right? That we're growing tomatoes at the campus farm from compost from the stadium, and the tomatoes are served in the residence hall. So it's just it's a full circular kind of program there.
Great. Yeah. And that's, if you can prove it's been done, then you can expand from there, which is amazing. So yeah. Any final thoughts to share, Paul, before we head out?
Yeah, on that subject of getting clean compost, that remains one of our biggest challenges with the Stadium Zero Waste program. Despite the fact that we have great signage, that we're doing some promotional videos, and we're doing our very best to educate folks, some don't care, right? And they'll dispose of a plastic water bottle in the compost bin. So we're working on that. We do have teams that walk around on football game days, students that volunteer, and they're led by folks from Andy's team that walk around and try to educate. We don't have someone standing at every single bin like some other stadiums have tried. There's just too many. Our stadium concourse is too big. But walking around and trying to educate where they can, it still remains a problem. And so now we do have a dedicated team of folks that go out on a Monday morning to the campus farm and try to remove all the contamination to make sure that the compost is as clean as possible. I know some other stadiums do that in their parking lots, on their concourses. We're doing it right at the campus farm in a partnership with our janitorial services provider. Proved to be super successful.
Interesting. Yeah. No, there's no end of complexity of creating a circular economy. That's a really good example. Well, I wanted to thank you both. This was great fun for me. I learned a lot about how to think about athletics. I hope you suffered through my winding questions today. So thanks again for agreeing to do this. And I look forward to hearing how things progress over the next couple of years. It sounds like you're just getting started.
That sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
That's it for this episode. This podcast is proudly produced by Brailsford and Dunleavy. A big shout out to the team who makes it happen. This episode was produced by David Almany and Carmela Laharde with assistance from Claudia Ahawo. A huge thanks to our sound editor, Kristen Crawford. Our theme music, Under the Radar, comes courtesy of Dallas-based musician and arranger Geo Washington Wright and his studio big band. If you haven't already, be sure to follow Campus Energy and Sustainability Podcast on LinkedIn or Blue Sky. You can do a deeper dive on past episodes at campusenergypodcast.com. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a quick rating or review on your favorite podcast platform. It's a great way to get the word out about the show. As always, thanks for listening.